All right, guys, we are recording. We're here with hang on, Lauren's jumping in here. Ludmila, Rafael, and Jorge. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. So Lauren is going to fire away with the first question.
I'm not sure if I asked this question before, but what is it like talking to politicians or politics? I'm not sure which one.
It's just the same like to talk to you, you need the same simple way to explain where we stand and what we defend and why we came to them. If you don't put it in a simple way, most probably they will not understand what you are talking about, because for you it's death and life question, but for them it's just one of 1,000 of requests they receive, and they don't have much attention quite often for your life, for your specific problem. So you need to be really motivated to draw attention and actually explain why you came, what you want, and why it's an important issue that they have to pay attention. They have to help you.
Yes, exactly. If I can add something, I would say that when I'm talking to academics, they often ask me why questions, like why does this happen? And basically I had to explain mechanically why process happen and why they happen. But with politicians, it's actually they want to know, okay, explain to me easily, how is the impact, what is the impact? So basically, yeah, short attention span that way.
All right. Well done.
I think from my perspective, I think it helps providing analogies when you're talking. So analogies that they can sort of associate with the new concepts that you're discussing. That's a good way to communicate your message, and always be super clear and concise. They don't have a lot of time. They're just, they're listening to 20 people every day. So you're just one of 20.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, thank you for your question.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, that is unfortunate. That is the reality that we face, right? And that's why a lot of these systems are broken, because the people that are in charge, in air quotes, of making the decisions and regulations and the policies, there's just a line of people outside their door asking them for things and this, that, and the other, and whatever else. And it's just all so overwhelming. But before we get into everything, why don't we just go around and you introduce yourselves and the reason that we're going to do this podcast today?
Sure, maybe I will first. So, hi everyone, my name is Ludmila Kozlovska. I'm a president founder of Open Dialogue Foundation, human rights organization, which was under attack since 2018 by 3 authoritarian regimes. Because of our human rights work, we were financially excluded. We, from one side, got political support. Even President Macron, President of Germany, parliaments of Germany, France, Belgium, and many others supported us. But they were not able to protect us against abuse of anti-money laundering, counter-terrorism regulation, when 3 regimes weaponized my banking data, my organization banking data, lawyers, volunteers, and everyone around me. So this is the reason why we started to use Bitcoin, to protect people who are our donors, to protect people who are our recipients. And this is also the reason why we educate regulators, why it's so important to protect traditional financial institutions, but why it's also important not to associate with the so-called illicit activities, neutral technology, something like Bitcoin and actually proof of work.
Perfect.
My name is Jorge Georgetown. I'm the director of an international organization of youth activism. I'm also a researcher at a university in Europe called ESE Business School. And basically my work in every sense of the word is basically I want to advance freedom, especially in authoritarian places. And I do research on the intersection between economics and foreign policy. And basically, Ludmila and I start cooperating because I saw that providing financial instruments to activists and immigrants and all these communities is basically the most important work that we can do today to advance democracy and to safeguard human rights, and in this case, economic rights.
My name is Rafael Cordon. I'm a technology entrepreneur. I founded a company called Simple Proof. We were hired by the Guatemalan Supreme Electoral Tribunal to help safeguard elections documents using the Bitcoin blockchain. We did that successfully last year, and that helped prevent a false fraud narrative around election results.
And I've actually watched that documentary. They showed it at Plan B, Lugano conference, and Peter Todd was part of that as well.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay. So yeah, just for anybody not fully versed with that, tell people exactly what you did, how the election worked, and like the state of play since then.
So Peter Todd is a very well-known pioneer in the Bitcoin space. He was one of the early people involved. He does a lot of applied cryptography, building things around Bitcoin and contributing to Bitcoin Core. Back in 2016, he invented a protocol called open timestamps, which enables any person to store the hash or the digital fingerprint of a document inside the op return function in a Bitcoin transaction. Bitcoin transactions, if you make an analogy with like a check, like a physical check, there's a memo section in the physical check where you can write additional information. The op return function is a similar like space for free text where you can put free text inside a Bitcoin transaction. So that space can be used to store any arbitrary information. In this case, what's stored is a hash that represents a tree of hashes of documents. And so what you're able to do is to provide proof of existence of a specific digital document from a certain point in time. So that's sort of the technology piece. How this was used in Guatemala was back in 2019 in the previous elections, a group of citizens, sort of a civic group of people were timestamping documents that were being generated by the elections. The elections generate the key document there is a vote tally sheet. And so vote tally sheets were being published by the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, which is the institution that's in charge of running the elections. And they were published on this portal, and the citizens, the team of citizens who were timestamping this using open timestamps, they realized that there was some strange behavior on. Documents were uploaded, then deleted, and then some other documents were uploaded. And they were like, this is weird. This is like, not the type of behavior that you want when you're having transparent elections. So they had their voice heard by the officials. And in this year, we were able to actually do it in an official manner. So the Supreme Electoral Tribunal hired what they called an respaldo inalterable, meaning unalterable backup. And this unalterable backup would take documents as soon as they're scanned. These are physical tally sheets that are scanned, they go through a scanner, and these documents would be timestamped using the open timestamp protocol before being actually hand counted. And so in that way, storing this immutable or tamper evident proof of the documents. And so they hired us, we implemented it, and it went great. It functioned perfectly. And afterwards, there was a lot of, unfortunately, there is this global trend that the loser always says that there's fraud in elections. And so that's sort of what happened in Guatemala, but the documents were already stored in this immutable manner. And so with this sort of fraud narrative, prosecutors that have already been sanctioned by the United States, they broke into the Electoral Tribunal office and confiscated the physical tally sheets. What they didn't know at the time was that these documents were already stored immutably on the Bitcoin blockchain. So basically, any tampering of these documents would be very evident that they try to fake the documents. So, in a sense, Bitcoin was used in a positive way to protect the integrity of elections.
Wow, amazing story. Okay, Lyudmila, I'll come to you because you sent me the text to set this up, because you wanted to share a summary of the 27 meetings organized by the Open Dialogue Foundation during the 4th week of January, including the US State Department, the US FATF, the US Treasury Department, staffers from the Helsinki Commission, and staffers from the 13 chairmen of the US Senate committees, subcommittees engaged in AML, CFT, and crypto asset regulation. Well, you were busy then.
Yes, actually, we were busy, but we are very happy to have these meetings, and I'm really grateful for Jorge Dressati that he was able to support us as an organization, to logistically and also financially, so we can come to Washington together with Rafa and also other members of the youth organization from Nepal, for Honduras, to conduct these important meetings. Why? Because you know from our previous podcast that we succeed to protect Bitcoin specifically as a payment and fundraising instrument in Europe, right? In Europe, we have also remedies to protect right now after our 2 years of campaign, financial data and also fundraising data, but it's not the case for other countries. And we succeeded at that time to protect self-hosted wallets. So what's happened? Actually, US and many other G7 countries were unhappy for such a liberal approach from the side of European Union. And in G7 communique last year in May, just right after this draft was supported by European Parliament with more liberal approach to crypto assets and specifically Bitcoin transactions, there was a request to recognize peer-to-peer transactions and self-hosted wallets as a threat to financial integrity and security. And we are very much concerned with this kind of approach because as a civil society representative, we don't have other tools. We financially excluded, and it's not a joke. It's the question of life and death for all of us. And we understand from right now, FinCEN announced in last autumn public consultation. So we prepared basically submission from activists from all over the world. We ask also Bitcoiners to participate as representatives of former regulated exchanges or regulated exchanges. For example, we have submission from OB in Warsaw who explain why financial institutions doesn't want such people like us, why financial institutions will refuse us services or basically send all of our data on the first request to authoritarian regimes according to the current anti-money laundering country regulations. Or why, for example, from Michael Chobanian, once he refused to send this data to Belarus and to Russia about fundraising campaigns on his exchange, during protests in Belarus and Russia, he basically has to quit the market of these countries, right? And he gets threat also criminal persecution in those regimes. But if in case of Russia and Belarus, it's clear for international communities, it's not clear, for example, if we speak about other states like Central Asian states. And in these countries, those regimes are able to obtain all data, and it's happened, unfortunately, both in Uzbekistan and in Kazakhstan. And our network of activists were absolutely destroyed. Like people were sentenced for over 7 years, being accused of financing extremist terrorism activities, threat to national security, money laundering. All of these accusations are fake. The only reason why all of these people's lives were destroyed and these people were tortured just because they wanted to have peaceful life without corruption. They were fighting for democracies. They were exposing how authoritarian regimes circumventing sanctions, helping Russia with use of financial institutions of third countries. And all of this information we brought to these 27 meetings. We ask, guys, okay, we understand you don't like us to use Bitcoin. No problem. Give us one single tool, alternative, what we can use right now when we financially excluded. Right now, we financially excluded, and it's not a joke. It's a matter of life and death. And there was no answer. So there was the following question. What do you guys want from us? We want to actually have reform of approach. First of all, we want to have negative language towards to Bitcoin peer-to-peer transactions, mixers, and other privacy mechanisms change to neutral. Of course, there can be bad actors who are using these important instruments, but there are legitimate users, and we should not suffer just because some bad actors is using it. The second, what we ask, is to change approach of travel rule of financial action task forces. So financial institutions of third countries should not be treated equally to financial institutions of actually, democracies, because all of this financial data flow into back and forth, and then all of us vulnerable also in democracies, because regimes are able to weaponize, and they are normally doing weaponization of all of this important information. And we asked both State Department, Financial Action Task Forces, and senators to consider not to share financial intelligence information tools with dictatorship, because all of these tools used against civil society. It takes 3 to 5 minutes to block bank account of civil society activists who basically fundraising for human rights or support families of political prisoners. You would not find this speed fighting of, Belarus, Kazakhstan, or other regimes with extremists. They recognize Taliban actually as legitimate government, for example. And we have a number of these kind of requests. So our main request was also to bring our voices as a third actually voice, not only banking industry listening, not only Interpol listening, but also us as civil society, as victims of abuse of anti-money regulation, and also people, for example, like Rafa, like Jorge, because the voice of young people always overlooked. And for us, it was super interesting and super important to give the floor also, for example, to Jorge and Rafael. Rafael presenting the tool which protects election. And we live in a moment when European Parliament, US, many of European countries have elections, and all of them afraid of abuse of artificial intelligence and electoral fraud. So we have answers, and we want this answer, these tools we will implement it to protect our voices in democracies, but not to share it as a tool to dictators, to destroy our lives. So this is kind of main messages. Of course, we have way more, and I think my colleagues Jorge and Rafael will share. So not only me speaking, but also they will share their impressions.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to get this clear, this all went down in the US, all of these meetings?
Yes, it was in US. It was 1 week. We have like crazy agenda, honestly.
Yeah.
27 meetings in 4 days, basically.
Yeah.
Wow. And all three of you went together as a team. Was there more of you?
Yes.
Was it?
I mean, we had more, but maybe Jorge will say who was with us. You invited people.
Yes, exactly. I also brought a few members of my organization, youth activists. I brought a brilliant woman who is from Honduras, an economist from Nepal as well, and also a policy analyst from Nigeria as well, so that they can also bring their own experiences on this issue.
How did you, just a practical question first of all, how did you manage to get all of those ducks in a row, get all of those meetings all set up in that 1 week with 27 different people, and why were they interested or open to meeting you?
I mean, a ton of preparation. It's basically a ton of preparation, following up, being organized, which are the skills that we need to actually make changes. And why they were interested? I mean, because most of policymakers, they are well-intentioned. When they see people who are suffering because of policies, and when they see, for example, human rights activists like us, they want to help. Most of them, they don't know. So, for example, when we were giving our testimonies to for example, people in the Senate or to people in the State Department, for them, it was shocking. It was shocking to know that this was happening. Most people know that, for example, activists, we cannot use bank accounts in our home countries, in countries like Venezuela, for instance, or in the Middle East or in Africa. However, most people do not know that this same issue is happening with activists in exile, who are being victims of this kind of transnational tools of repression. And of course, most of policymakers do not know that the way that we overcome these issues is with Bitcoin. So basically, we will explain to them all these processes. And they were extremely welcoming because we came, again, with personal testimonies, we came with proper data, we came with proper reports, and also because we already have experience pushing for these policy reforms and these ideas. And I think doing echo to something that Ludmila said, something that we were talking to them, and I think they understood, is that good policies, good institutions have to have different stakeholders always in the room. if policies are always, if, for example, if financial policies are made only with people representing bank institutions, of course, these policies will be naturally biased towards that. So in order to have policies that benefit the common good, that benefit most members of society, then you need to have civil society involved, you need to have young people involved, you need to have people from different countries and with different experiences. And I think they understand them. And I think, yeah, a lot of planning to pull off over 20 meetings in 4 days, of course.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Following up on what Jorge said, one of the things that we were mentioning was that there is a parallel here when a new disruptive technology threatens established legacy business models. The owners of the legacy business models are going to fight back. We saw it back. So a good example is back in the early 2000s when voice over IP was coming out, being able to make calls over the internet. That was a new technology. And the telecoms were scared of it. They saw it as a huge threat to their business models. And so there was a lot of the narrative at that time was that voice over IP would be used by it was right after 9/11. So voice over IP is going to be used by terrorists. It shouldn't, be controlled and regulated. And there was this guy, his name is Jeff Pulver. He used to own a computer server and host a computer server in his basement and had a website called freeworlddialup.com. And it was a website where you could make calls over the internet. This was before Skype, before all the early voice over IP things. And the technology was so bad that it would only work one way. So like a two-way radio, you could have to speak and then stop and listen to the other person. But it worked. And so the telecoms sued this guy. And it went all the way up to the Federal Communications Commission, who evaluated the telcos' concerns. These telcos were saying, "Oh, it's going to be used by terrorists," right? All these huge telecoms suing one single guy with a server in his basement, and the FCC ruled what's now called the Pulver Order because of this guy Jeff Pulver, and the Pulver Order said that voice over IP would not be considered a regulated telecommunications service because that would stifle innovation and the new things that were going on in the internet at that time. We're speaking about early 2000s. And now we see, fast forward 20 something years later, we're talking over voice over IP right now. We use voice over IP like every single day. It's like prevalent. It's like part of our lives, right? And so when you look at the narrative around Bitcoin in politicians and political circles, the banks are pushing this narrative of, oh, it's being used by terrorists and money launderers, like the same things that the telecoms were saying back in the day when they saw this threat to their business model. And so, part of what we want to do is, have our voice heard and say, hey, technology can be used for good or bad, but Bitcoin, these are examples of Bitcoin, the people using Bitcoin for very positive things. And, just have a voice in this narrative, I think is important.
Who do you think was the most responsive? You've been back a few weeks now and obviously had time to reflect on all of the meetings, and maybe some people have reached back out to you.
State Department, I would say, because it was the first roundtable on crypto assets where civil society testified about IML abuses and use of Bitcoin as a tool against financial repression and to protect against electoral fraud. We had like a number of people there, questions, very open discussion. For example, we also were asked how to protect traditional financial institutions. So we assume this is one of the most successful meetings because we see right now also different kind of contacts we can use to advocate and explain how Bitcoin played a crucial role in the defense of human rights and what we should do to make this technology as much as possible available for civil society, because there is a stigma. I know, for example, from colleagues from many organizations that they use Bitcoin, but they ashamed to recognize it publicly because they're afraid to lose donors. classical donors, and from other side, they're not able to send euro or USD to authoritarian states because it means literally death to their network of activists in many countries like Iran, like Russia, like Belarus, Turkey. You immediately, I mean, in Kazakhstan and Central Asian countries, you immediately recognize a threat to national security because you are foreign, so-called foreign agent. And again, this term foreign agent came from recommendations of financial action task forces. And this is an example how regimes weaponize these recommendations. So we said that we afraid very much that labeling Bitcoin and peer-to-peer transactions and proof of work as something with illicit activities, threat to national security, energy security, environment security, it's going actually to open the door for dictators to prosecute people who are using these the only available financial tools in authoritarian regimes. And, the problem is that if we don't educate regulators, legislators, they will stay with this opinion because what is present in mainstream media, only false narratives. And people live with narratives. Narratives shape policy and narratives shapes our, unfortunately, reality. So if we not defend human rights, and Bitcoin is a human rights, it's not something abstract, it's the only tool that we can use, we're going to lose it. And we will going to have more political prisoners, which will be not supported also in democracies, because if democratic countries recognize this tool as illegal, is only labeled with negative connotation, then how you can protect person who is prosecuted in authoritarian states, which user of this technology? So we don't want even allow to appear this language, negative language in democracies and in regulation of democracies. Because right now, for example, Kazakhstan is in front to prosecute people who are using peer-to-peer transactions. So everyone who is using peer-to-peer transactions, they label these people and they prosecute them as the money launderers. This is what's happening. And remember, Kazakhstan was a key country who actually hosted miners just right after China ban, right? What's happened next? They destroyed entire network with a different kind of regulation. They exhausted miners. They do the same now with peer-to-peer transactions. And Kazakhstan, unfortunately, became a role model for democracies like China, also what they're going to do, how they're going to destroy, what kind of tool they need to use to destroy this important freedom technology mechanism. This is the reason why we don't have our privileges. We have only this instrument, we defend it. We have no other chance. We cannot lose.
Have they ever asked where the negative kind of narrative comes from?
I think we all know.
I mean,
Wall Street Journal, and then all of these accusations about Hamas, and then luckily FinCEN said, oh, we all know that actually fiat, it's the most preferred currency for all Hamas and other terrorists and criminal groups. The issue is that Bitcoin doesn't have a voice in the parliaments. And we don't try to be the voice of Bitcoin, but we end users of Bitcoin, we cannot survive without Bitcoin. That's why we defend it.
Yeah, it's like you just walking in and saying, no, we need fire to keep warm, but these guys over here that have all the fire that they need, they don't want us to have it and they don't want us to use it. So I just wonder from like a policymaker's point of view, when they sit there and they see you guys come in and they listen to like everyday anecdotal stories of how this tool is being used and how it's changing lives, and then they apply like, why am I getting told something completely different? Why is everything that I've ever been told about this negative? Why is every headline that I've ever read about it's bad for the environment? And I just wonder how many of them go away from those meetings questioning the narrative that has been forced down their neck.
They were all surprised. I mean,
yeah,
they
were all surprised.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I think there are three reasons. And one of them is, for example, Ludmila mentioned, is the conflict of interest. Of course, and Rafa mentioned, when new technology emerge, then you have a traditional technology or traditional institutions trying to push it back. There is also, I think, also people who with good intentions that basically do not understand the technology. There are people who do not understand that this is actually a force for good and not a force for bad. And I think the third reason is that because people who use Bitcoin has not been strong enough and have not communicated well enough the benefits of Bitcoin for them. And I mean, people like us, as Ludmila mentioned, we are not here defending cryptocurrency per se. We're just saying that for us, it's a vital tool that we use. For us, it's nothing about the speculation. It's not even an investment mechanism. It's actually a human rights tool. So I think it's just we are trying to bring these voices to traditional institutions like parliaments, like the Treasury, like the State Department, because they need to know the other side of the story. But to do that, we need to work for it. And I think that before in the Bitcoin community, there were not many people who understood how to do this process and how to do proper advocacy. But that's something that we have to do because we live in democracies. Those who live in democracies need to use institutions that democracy provides to basically safeguard their financial rights. The same way that other industries, they protect themselves. I think the Bitcoin industry has to do the same.
Okay. Rafa, anything to add there before we move on?
I think always when there's a disruption and a disruption to legacy, technology or businesses, they're going to fight back. They're going to try to generate disinformation, try to stop it from being used. And we've seen it since the Industrial Revolution. At least I can find examples since the Industrial Revolution where this new technology can displace an established industry. But that's just, creative destruction is going to happen. And the thing with Bitcoin is that there is no CEO of Bitcoin, no, Bitcoin marketing department.
No lobbying group with,
right.
Yeah.
We, the users, we need to speak out.
Mm-hmm.
And not just, the three of us here.
That's what worries me, is that the lobbying groups, and lobbying is very prevalent in the US, are in the ears of the politicians or the regulatory bodies or the policymakers. So they get fed this narrative, this story, like the travel rule, for example. Ludmila, I think you mentioned in that
yes.
note that you sent me. So when you talk to the people there about the travel rule, do they understand like how disruptive that is to people? Do you, in fact, for the people listening, do you want to explain what that is and how it's affected
yes.
your work? Right.
So in simple words, travel rule is given kind of assumption that financial institutions, bank, crypto asset service providers, exchanges, they are equal to actually financial institutions of authoritarian states. Like all institutions are good actors, when it's not true, because authoritarian regimes, dictatorships, they use basically financial institutions as an arm against civil society, against opposition. For them, it's just one more instrument, the most powerful instrument, how you can actually neutralize person, opposition, activists, journalists, and their family members. You can basically keep them as a hostage. And from other side, you would save the face in front of democracies because this person alive, but it doesn't have means to live, right? So this is very sophisticated reason how you can destroy a person, not only domestically, you can destroy this person outside of the country. And this is what exactly happened with me, with my family, my 600 volunteers, lawyers, and accounting in the heart of Europe, in Brussels, when they weaponized my banking data by 3 regimes. And when I said to actually senator's office or financial action task force or State Department, they were all surprised. They said that it's first time they hear this kind of perspective. And this is why we have to be able to conduct this kind of meetings. This is not they read from media, because media doesn't interested in delivering this kind of information. Where you will find information that authoritarian regimes weaponize banking data. No articles about this. No articles about it. This is only podcasts like your podcast and others Bitcoiners. We actually want to know truth. So this is the reason why we should actually build this circle of solidarity, when I assume all Bitcoiners are the same activists like us, because with you guys, we can do things together. And actually, I assume even Satoshi Nakamoto was the same freedom activist like all of us. Otherwise, he would not create this tool. And when I asked, for example, on Nostr yesterday and the night before, I had discussion on Nostr. By the way, if someone is there, please subscribe on my profile there. I'm happy to chat. And then they ask, oh, you fail from the beginning because you want to change regulation with these guys. They will never hear you. No, they hear because they save people like us. And when all of them understand suddenly that regulation they adopted make them vulnerable, their banking data, their friends, relatives, the same exposed to all authoritarian regimes, it's actually changed their mind. And we speak face to face. They see a real person, and I was accused being a threat to national security, money launderer, spies, all of this fake accusation. So they see clear example of so-called false positive externalities. What's happened with people like whom they normally support, and I work with all of these institutions for 15 years. They was not aware that they almost destroyed our life with their adopted regulation without understanding the level how it can be abused by dictators. And this is how we change their perspectives. So none of them were left absolutely, ignorant. There was voices, we actually don't care because of security issues. But then at the end of the day, we said, okay, you don't care actually about all millions of people financially excluded? Are you sure? Oh, no, I didn't mean it. So this is something we want to actually achieve. We want to change their minds, and they are people like us. That's why we need to have this open dialogue.
So what's the current travel rule?
So current travel rule that all information that financial institutions of authoritarian states can do request to financial institutions of democracies and obtain all your data without any protection. And it means
they can request all of your data, all of your banking, down to every single transaction, all the way down to zero. Right.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they can do weaponization of it around everyone around you, because it's your roadmap, how you move, what you do, how you live, where you buy groceries, who is your doctor, everything. And they can attack you specifically, very precisely. This is one of the most dangerous tools they have in their hands.
And what was your suggestion to them for changing that?
First of all, they need to limit the sharing and stop to giving the tool of as a financial intelligence to authoritarian regime, and they need to recognize that financial institutions of third countries actually serving to circumvent sanctions. This is what they're accusing Bitcoin. No one is using Bitcoin to circumvent sanctions in a scale. They use it to financial institutions of third countries and authoritarian states. This is the first thing. The second thing that they have to provide us a civil society tool as alternative to actually defend human rights in those authoritarian states, and it's majority of countries in the world. It means that they should not apply the same rules to Bitcoin, because it will be basically destroyed as a mechanism. It will be impossible in legal way to use it. And the third, of course, they have to rethink. It's not something what I can provide as a human rights activist. I need to have discussion, open discussion in the Senate, where we have human rights activists targeted by abuse of AML CFT laws. We have crypto asset services providers. We have investors in Bitcoin. We have banking industry, and we have Interpol and financial action task forces. And all of us should have the floor in this important platform, with equal time. So we need to be able to testify and find together solution. But it cannot be just one side like now it's happening, on the closed doors where we have no access to decision-making process in financial action task forces, recommendations issued, and then we just spend years and years to change it. It should not work like this in democracies. We differs from authoritarian regimes that civil society, basically citizens, they should and have the right to have a voice.
Well, When are you going back, guys?
We were invited to come back to April, but we fundraising for the moment to be able to do so. It's not easy for us to come from overseas, you know. We need also to do the same homework in EU because as a G7 countries, US think that it's produced. One thing that also was funny, that all of US senators said, oh, you know, why you came for us from, you know, Europe with this problem? It's just domestic law. And I said, guys, it's never domestic. Whatever you say in US, it's actually approach the entire world. It's actually, you establish the so-called golden standard of regulation. It's affect all of us entirely. So please consider that you affect us and you have to listen to us. So we would love to come in April to do follow-up, but yeah, it's a matter of our capacity.
Jorge, did you have anything to add there?
Well, I think what it was said before me is precisely right. You know, these are the type of provisions we have to put together. We need to guarantee that everybody has access to financial instruments, traditional financial instruments, and also Bitcoin. Something that, for example, there were policymakers were also extremely receptive is that I also brought up the example of how immigrants are being financially excluded because of anti-money laundering regulations. So basically, immigrants from difficult places, like most immigrants, countries like Venezuela or Nicaragua or African countries, etc., we are being deprived of financial services because of the risk profile of many of these immigrants. So something I was explaining to policymakers is that these immigrants, they need to be economically incorporated, economically integrated, because otherwise they will not be able to be productive members of society. Otherwise, they will not be self-reliant members of society. And I was explaining to them that these unintended consequences will continue to grow and grow if these anti-money laundering regulations are not being reformed in ways that they protect the human rights of people. So basically, millions of people, millions of immigrants will end up paying the price of the crimes of the same people who forced these people to flee to other nations. So this is something that, for example, we are advancing in Europe. I was explaining to them how in Europe I wrote a policy proposal on this issue and was picked up by members of parliament. So basically in the Council of Europe, in the Parliamentary Assembly, they pick up my policy proposal and over 20 members of parliament are formally supporting my proposal of basically guaranteeing a right to banking to all immigrants by reforming AML regulations. So this is something that we also brought up to the US because in the US, the problem is not as systematic, but I think it will be more and more and more. And based on data that we have been collecting, we believe this. So yes, so basically underrepresented, undermined communities like immigrants or minorities in the US, African-American minorities, for example, they are disproportionately targeted by all these anti-money laundering regulations, which of course they never end up catching the real people who are committing money laundering. As it was said before, in case of Venezuela, all the sanctions are being avoided and circumvented through financial institutions, traditional financial institutions of third countries. And those are the real money launderers. And those are the real people that we need to catch.
Did you meet Senator Warren?
No.
We try.
We tried.
We try and
Yeah,
we try a lot.
Yeah. That would have been great to explain to her.
We said we're ready to meet at every day, every time. She just said to us online or in person, but so far no reply.
Oh yeah, imagine if the three of you could sit there and go through the FATF, the travel rule, the AML, and then Rafa just like explain like the electoral benefits as well.
Yes, and I mean, and I think that that's why we need to come back to the US, and that's why we need to do more activism. That's why we need to raise awareness because there need to be enough pressure for us to meet with her. And as you mentioned, we need to tell her all these things, and not only about Bitcoin, but about economics in general, because all the ideas that she brings about economics are dangerous ideas, are wrong ideas. The way, for example, she tries to create a correlation about inflation and greedy corporations, the way she tries to blame private sector for inflation is simply wrong and is dangerous because in countries like mine, our economy was destroyed precisely because of these ideas.
And Biden was doing it during the Super Bowl.
Yes, string economics.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Really?
Is not understanding the laws of economics. Is basically blaming private companies for the faults of monetary policy, of fiscal policies. It is impossible to not have inflation with the amount of money supply that the US government has been printing. And basically, again, the results of these policies are extremely, extremely detrimental because in countries like mine, because of these ideas, millions of families end up in starvation. Millions of businesses end up losing their entire life saving, their entire life work. So it's extremely irresponsible, and that's what we need to, we are doing everything we are doing. We're having all these meetings because for us is a personal matter. For us is life and death. For us, we have seen the destruction that bad policies create. Something that we tell policymakers is that numbers are cold, but like the result of these policies destroy millions of life that in most cases they never hear about, life that in most cases they never even see. But our job is to become a bridge, from all these millions of people, immigrants or activists or everybody who is being financially excluded or economically excluded in all the sense of the word. And basically bring all these experiences so that way they understand that policies matter, ideas matter.
Do you ever wonder if these people are just reading from a script that is written from an invisible hand, they're captured by these people and they're just going to carry on doing what they're doing anyway?
But it's not invisible, There is an economist called John Maynard Keynes, which is of course one of the most famous economists. He basically says that all politicians or all public people are basically, he called it the slave of ideas created by other people. People have ideas in their heads. They have assumptions in their head. People have ideas about the way the world works. People have ideas about what justice means. That's why the ideas that are propagated at universities are so important. That's why the ideas propagated by journalists are so important. Because it's not an invisible hand. It's just a matter of what ideas do people have in their heads. In Venezuela, you have all politicians following socialist ideas because they honestly thought that this was the best way for the country. And our job is to explain to them that that's not the best way and that we know what is the best way. So it's not an invisible hand. It's not only a teleprompter, it's ideas. Maybe not the ideas, not even their ideas, but ideas of their staffers, their advisors. So yes, I think it's a matter of that. It's just convincing people.
It's a matter of education. Exactly. I absolutely agree with what says Jorge. And I saw it, why we're doing this advocacy for 15 years, why we were effective, the 3 regimes going after us and try to destroy us as an organization, because we were effective in bringing the voice of those who were completely deprived to have voices on international level. And we helped them to be defended. We released hundreds of political prisoners. We changed legislations. For example, abuse of Interpol was prevented on a huge scale. So, and many, many other instruments. But it wouldn't be possible if regulators would not listen to us. And this is, I think, our advantage, because when they ask us, are you guys crypto guys or your lobbyists? We said, no, we are those who your regulation affect directly. We don't speculate. We don't use it as any kind of weird instrument. It's the only instruments to survive. We financially excluded because you adopted this law. Please change it. Because we know this, you support us, because you support human rights. But look what's happened with us. Our life is destroyed. Regimes are able to weaponize and actually destroy democracies because of these tools you adopted. And this is something would change the narratives, and we want to change these narratives. So we need to have as much as possible support, people with us, like Bitcoin miners. A lot of accent was this time also questions about miners and Bitcoin mining. And we know that right now it's also a process of so-called collection of information from biggest 80 miner companies in US. So we would love to support them, and we would love to bring some of them at least for meetings in April, and at least to do submissions the same like we've done in EU together, human rights defenders and Bitcoin miners, because we use this technology as the only instrument when people financially excluded.
Mm-hmm. Rafa, what's happened since the election?
Since the election, with the support of the United States, the elected president was able to take office to be sworn in at the literally at the last minute. He's had a challenging start because the sort of corrupt forces are still, trying to fight back. But yeah, so Guatemala is sort of advancing. It's moving on, I would say. And yeah, on our side, we're still talking to a lot of people, different governments, to see if this is sort of a protocol that can be adopted by more people, and not just on elections, because elections is sort of a very a use case that is very compelling, but it's not, it can also be used for boring things like, court rulings, intellectual property, Freedom of Information Act requests, that type of sort of digital evidence. And so this sort of protocol can be used for more things in government where there's digital information that people care about. That's very important. Of course, protecting democracy, I think, is the most important use case for everyone who lives in a democracy and cares about, democracy. But there's a lot of other use cases for it. And I just wanted to piggyback on what Jorge said about education. One thing that I was surprised is we had a chance to sort of discuss with some of these folks in our visit, what is Bitcoin. They were learning about it. And one thing that really blew my mind was this idea that, and I was looking at a draft bill, that it said like, they defined the concept of an unhosted wallet. And so an unhosted wallet needed to register with FinCEN. And I was outraged because this is sort of more like a first, the United States freedom, like free speech is a very important thing, right? I'm not going to say everything is bad. Like free speech is very good. And there's precedents on code, like computer code being free speech. So in order to create like an unhosted wallet, you just need a software on your computer and literally just dice and, generate randomness with dice, throwing dice. And so what I'm going to do that and register that with FinCEN. It's ridiculous, right?
It's ludicrous. It's ludicrous. And Freddie New from the Bitcoin Policy Institute UK, I think he chose 12 words out of Senator Warren's first paragraph of her letter to. Did you see that tweet? She was banging the table about unhosted wallets, and so yeah, he made an unhosted wallet out of 12 words from her first paragraph to that letter, and said, "This is how you do it." Now, do you want me to now go to FinCEN and turn over? Like, what are you saying? It's complete madness.
And you need to make the link for these people who are like involved in drafting policy. You need to make the link with this and free speech, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, Lyudmila, I know you've probably got to leave in a few minutes, but do you want to quickly update us as to, obviously this was all in America, what's been going on in Europe since we last spoke, and you were fighting the good fight over here about the proof of work mining ban?
So basically, we're at the same page. We're collecting testimonials. We need any kind of support as a non-profit, non-partisan NGO, a non-governmental organization. We right now doing online meetings because we have no capacity to come in person. Even today, we had meetings with Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe President's Office to inform them how we use Bitcoin, why it's important to defend tools of democracy. We call Bitcoin tools of democracy. And we want to be this voice in international institutions defending basically proof of work and human rights. And we have only 1 year to defend proof of work against labeling it with energy security or environmental security threats. And I want to say it's not just something abstract. France already introduced it with a basically decree of the government last year, enforcing that investment because of ESG provisions in fossil of oil, it's actually almost banned. So it's not something abstract, it's coming. If we don't defend, if Bitcoin and actually proof of work is not going to have its voice in front of regulators and legislators, it will be just one false narrative, and we have to stop it.
Okay. How can people help?
They can help us with testimonials. We need to get testimonials of Bitcoin miners from all over the world, because Bitcoin mining and proof of work mining is going to be global, both in EU and in US. It has the same basically approach. The second, we need to have donations. So we need to have also people coming with us on meetings. Like now we have online, we have to have meetings offline, and we need to have capacity voices of those who Bitcoin miners going with us to regulators. This is basically three things what we need.
Mm-hmm. So is it preferable to have the in-person meetings? Do you find them to have a much greater effect?
Because then you have more direct requests and questions from the side of regulators and legislators. They will ask you questions which will never ask online or in publicly.
So there's a QR code, I believe, on your website for sending donations. Okay.
Absolutely. Yes, and we do Engazer also. We have Lightning address, so you can easily donate to us.
All right.
And so we prefer in Bitcoin, of course.
Of course, yes, for the audience. Okay, so via the website or via Geyser and via time, if anybody has the time to commit and can write a testimonial or is in a position to give up some time and come along with one of the meetings as well, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I think we've covered everything, unless Rafa or Jorge, Ludmila, you can go. Yes.
Thank you. Sorry.
I'm not going to keep you. I'm not going to.
Okay. Sorry.
So, if there's anything else, guys, that you wanted to drill down on, feel free. Do you want to take this anywhere else?
I mean, I want to reiterate the importance of many people, for example, many people who believe in technology, they are not as used to talk about a regulatory framework or institutional kind of changes of all these things. But I think this is the most important thing we can do right now to safeguard Bitcoin, because something that I want to highlight is how regulators are working extremely hard to criminalize Bitcoin and criminalize everybody like users, miners, etc., internationally. And this is something that we need to work on this year, because next year maybe will be too late. So that's something that I want to highlight. And I mean, we have been working extremely hard in the places that we need to, which are again, American institutions and European institutions, because they are the ones who create everything for the rest of the world. Especially, there's this organization that was mentioned before called FATF, Financial Action Task Force. They are the G7 organization that creates all the financial regulations on anti-money laundering. And we have met with them in several occasions. We have been invited by them to do kind of conversations. We met with the former president. And again, like we're doing everything we can, because for us is a human rights tool. It's the only tool we have to fight in places like Venezuela, or to fight in Africa, or to fight in the Middle East.
And if somebody is listening and feels inspired enough to start their own group, their own initiative, what's the first step? What can they do to get something? So let's say they're listening to you guys now. How can they be where you're at in 18 months to 2 years' time? What do they need to do?
Well, it's very good that you mentioned this, because something that we are working on is that we want to establish an academy, a training program for people who want to do this kind of advocacy work. And in there, we want to establish what are the best practices. We want to have a one-on-one mentorship session. We want to have, again, ways to educate and empower people how to do this. On simple terms, very abstract, of course, something that I would say is that in order to make this work, you need to be able to have the expertise, the people, the testimonies. You need to know how to do procedures, etc. So the best way, if somebody is inspired, please reach out to any of us on social media, reach out to any of us in our websites, and basically tell us how do you want to help. We need people. We need, for example, brilliant researchers to help us put more data into our submissions. We need people with testimonies. We need people, again, to help us with donations. So basically, we need people who are journalists, people who can help us advance and spread our voices. So we need everybody, and that's why we build coalitions. That's something that we believe in. We believe in building coalitions with different kind of people, with activists, but also with experts, but also with people who have worked on financial institutions, because I think that's the way we can actually make changes. We can actually complement each other with our skill sets. So yeah, if somebody's interested, please reach out to us in social media or in any way.
Okay. Well, I'll email all three of you so you can send me any of the links that we can put in the show notes so people can find you on the socials at your actual, official websites and whatever else. So that'll be perfect. But I always leave the conversation on one question, the same question every time. And it's to both of you. And you get to decide who goes first. But if you had one last orange pill left to give to somebody, who would you give that to and why?
The president of the Financial Action Task Force, I guess.
Well, excellent. You got a good chance. You're going to get to meet him again. So, yeah, perfect. Rafa?
Now, I would just recommend folks to go to film.simpleproof.com and check out the documentary called Immutable Democracy. I think it tells the story about how Bitcoin was used to secure elections. So anybody who's interested in that, please check it out. Film.simpleproof.com.
And who would, you're not skipping the question, who would you give your last orange pill to and why?
The President of the United States.
All right, guys, it's been great to get to know you. Thank you both for coming on. Thank you for your tireless effort and work trying to get through to the policymakers. It takes an incredible amount of determination, a certain amount of, well, definitely a certain personality type. There's no way I could do it. So, my hat's off to you both and to Lyudmila as well, and to everybody that is out there doing the activist work on behalf of the plebs and humanity at large. Thank you so much.
Thanks to you, my friend. Appreciate the kind words.
Awesome.
Have a great day, guys. Thank you.
You too.